Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. O.P. Verma from Himachal Pradesh University, Shimla. Today we are going to talk on module Developing the Change Agent and Client Relationship from paper Organizational Change and Development. After studying this module, you will be able to understand the client system as well as the change agent. The trust issue that exists between the parties, points to be considered while formalizing the change agent client relationship, the warning points that needs to be considered between the relationships of the two parties, implications of OD for the client. Let's start with the introduction. Whenever an organizational development program initiates in any organization, it first starts with establishing a formalized working relationship between the change agent or the consultant or the management of the organization, which requires the consultancy in order to bring in required change. Because of the complexity that persists within the organization working environment, implanting change in the existing work area is difficult. Therefore, it necessitates to establish a relationship between the change agent and the client. If in any case the relationship that persists between these two parties is weak or superficial, bringing an innovation successfully in the organization becomes an impossible task to accomplish. The success rate of implementing any organization development technique is dependent to a large extent upon the relationship between these two parties, which needs to be developed in the very initial stage of the change program. The issue here, which needs to be understood properly, is that this bond between the change agent as well as the client does not just happen coincidentally. It is a formalized relationship that happens in a proper planned manner. This formal relationship is carefully started, executed, and developed with due awareness, perceptiveness, and risk taking on the part of both the concerned parties. Before moving ahead with the implementation of any organization development intervention, the change agent must ensure first the limitation within which the activities are going to proceed. It is pertinent to mention in clear contractual terms that the objective for which the interventions are going to be applied. Also, furthermore, it is essential to discuss with the client system that how the reporting system is going to be established. The client system. When we go through the concept of applying the organizational development interventions, we always focus exclusively for defining the change agent more. But it is equally noteworthy to discuss the client system, which forms an important part of the system. The question of who actually is the client forms an important question. Similarly, the client can be an individual or it can be an management team of the organization. At the very initial stage, an individual, basically a member of the organization team, is seen as a client, but as the time passes by, the trust and confidence issue starts to develop between the two parties, and the change agent starts to perceive the manager as well as his subordinate in the management team as the client. The change agent. Now, another related question that arises here in this situation is that how the change agent is going to proceed with the implementation of the organizational development interventions. Usually, it is advised the change agent must be in touch with one's own feeling. it is advocated that a more open system is considered legitimate in effective problem solving and increases the competency. Also, being too aloof will tend to minimize the possibilities of helping the client system. Further, it is always advised that to maximize the client system effectiveness, the change agent must continuously practice and develop the effective behavioral modeling techniques to apply on the client system. The client system would receive more benefits if the organizational development consultant give clear words and apparent feelings, suggest methods of problem solving to encourage, support, and give feedback in ways that are acceptable and constructive. For the consultant team to get acceptance from the client system, the team needs to show its effectiveness to enhance its credibility among members. The effectiveness is visible from the very growth and renewal process of the team. Another quality that shows the effectiveness can be the quality of interrelationship among the various members of the team that will help to resolve the intra-group differences. The trust and confidence issue. To facilitate a good deal of relationship between the change agent as well as the client, their assertive interaction that implicitly relates to developing a relationship of mutual trust, confidence, and understanding. Say, if we take the issue on the client lack of confidence, on the change agent credentials, or the workforce will have a complaint with regard to the working of the change agent, or the secrecy concern will be abolished with the involvement of outside party. Also, subordinates will resolve because their concern would lie that they will manipulate towards their superior goals with no attention to their own goals. Thus, consultant has to deal with these kind of concern with regard to the client system and win over the trust and confidence. Similarly, on the consultant or change agent part, the trust issue will also start from neutral. The consultant will also try to understand the client's motive specified as well as hidden behind the implementation of the intervention techniques. Surfacing such motives and examining their implications for effective behavior will enhance trust between the consultant and the client, which will help to ensure the success of the organizational development activities. Initiation of the change agent client relationship. At the very initial stage, the change agent as well as the client remains very objective in assessing and perceiving each other's capacities and capabilities. The initial interventions might therefore be a reconnaissance on both sides. Here, the client system keeps on assessing the change agent capabilities. On the other hand, the change agent tries to evaluate the organization commitment to change as well as the objectives that lies behind. Both the parties must try to focus on their first impression on the opposite party, because once an impression is made, it becomes difficult to change. It is often seen that the client system tries to take assurance from the consultant to be understandable and approachable. But the change agent must also keep in mind that he is not selling himself to the client system for the sake of just doing the consulting work. It is important that the change agent system remains fair to his work, and before taking the task of consultancy, the change agent must judge if the client system needs his services or not. It is equally important that the differences as well as the similarities between the client system and the consultant system. There may be a possibility of differences among the work and value culture of change agent and the client, which needs to be assessed. At the same time, the client system may not get so much familiar with the change agent in the initial stage, but the differences in the work culture of both the parties are too great, then this is going to hamper the success of the development program. The change which is going through understanding the system and subsystem of the organization must try to find out the conflicts between different working units and also try to bring out the reasons behind. He needs to be conscious in avoiding being a part of any existing conflict, because if in any case that happens, different group will develop a perception regarding the change agent to be a part of the particular subgroups, which will result the intervention program to confront resistance on the later stage. Therefore, in concrete terms, when the change agent enters in a relationship with the client system, following points need to be considered with due care. To check the behavioral attitude of the management towards implementing the organizational change, the consultant need to scrutinize here with due care that the underlying desire of the organization towards change is real or superficial. The change agent must ensure to understand the variables of the client's problem with due care. The change agent, before doing its own appraisal, must go through the client's appraisal of the problem as well. The change agent must correlate the possibilities of the organizational development program with the problem itself and see if it will resolve the problem. The impact the change agent holds on the system must also be ensured. Based upon the feedback from the client system, programs are to be developed. Formalization of change agent client relationship. Usually, the first interaction between the change agent and client is informal in nature. They first tend to explore if there is a possibility of establishing a relationship between the client as well as the change agent. After several meetings, both the parties come on the decision of finalizing the relationship by defining each other's role and procedure of furthering the activities. This formalization of the task and its related obligations in the form of a legal contractual relationship is necessary if the change agent is external to the organization. But if the change agent is internal to the organization, then there is not necessary to have a formal document of relationship. Rather, the change agent can proceed further with clearly defining its operational ground to fulfill the objectives. The formalities of the contract between the change agent and the client specifies as follows. Parties to contract. The contract would specify the point of contract, the representative of the client system, and the other signing part, or say the chosen change agent for the intervention program, defining roles. The contract specifically define in clear and absolute terms the role change agent is going to play within the client system. Financial charges. The contract who specifies the amount the change agent would be charging from the agent. The charges of the consultancy would depend on the services given. Also, depending upon the financial status of the client as well as the time given for consultancy. Defining schedule. The contract will also goes for defining the time period for the implementation of the organizational development program. It will also specify the total time period the change agent is going to devote in general and in specific terms. Deciding on the anticipated results. The results which the client organization wants are specifically anticipated in advance. However, most of the times the change agent clearly mention to what level they are attainable if there comes an uncertainty in the environment. The change agent must promise to do its best in diagnosing the problem confronting the organization. Operational rules. This would also consist of all the operational rules and regulations within which the organizational change agent is going to proceed further with the interventions. These rules would be defining the condition and limitations within which the change agent will proceed to work. Warning in the change agent client relationship. The client and the change agent, before formalizing their working relationship, must go through various informal meetings to decide whether their working criteria matches up or fits with each other. Both the parties must obligate to each other whether or not they want to be a part of the process. If there is an incomplete beginning to this process, then in the later stage it will ruin the change effort and the whole of the organizational development program will end up on an unfruitful experience. Some of the critical warning in the change agent client relationship can be considered as follows. Commitment level. Many a times it is experienced that the client system is not prepared to absorb the change interventions. However, members of the organization express their commitment in verbal terms, but their behavior depicts a completely different picture. Power to influence change. It often happens that a change agent is invited in the organization for bringing any organized change, but at the same time, he is not invited by an official who have the concerned power or leverage to bring in any change or influence the top management decision. In this case, it is the obligation of the change agent to first ensure if the invitee has the power to influence and also ascertain the degree of top management's receptiveness and support for any required change before being a party of any organizational development program. Exploitative use of change agent power. There is a possibility that the person who is requesting external assistance may want to use the change agent as a tool to change others according to his ideas or perception. This would surely result in destructive way of development rather than constructive way with the exploitation of the change agent. The other reason possible can be using the change agent in obtaining the important information which is otherwise unattainable. So it needs to be taken care of that change agent is not exploited for internal power struggle. Going through the historical aspects, the change agent before moving forward must ensure to go through the past of the organization. It must read out the previous resistance to change, if they were valid or not. In addition to this, the change agent must go through the previous attempts of change or the reasons for their being failed. Implication of organizational development for the client. An organizational development effort has some fundamental implication for the management of the client organization, and these implications need to be shared and understood at the outset. They are: number one, to enlarge the database for making management decisions. In particular, the management is considered as the think tank for the organization. For this very specific reason, the management needs to be fully prepared with all the relevant information on their part. Number two, to expand the influence processes. The management of the client system ought to be influential to their part to the extent that they can easily reconcile with the subordinates who at the end are going to implement the change in the real sense. Number three, to capitalize on the strength of the informal system and to make the formal and the informal system more congruent. If the management wants to check the reaction of the individual regarding the change, then in that case the change agent must influx the change in the informal organization, and then after receiving the reactions and making necessary changes, implant the change in the formalized manner. Number four, to become more responsive. Management must ensure that it is more responsive with the demands of the system and accordingly works with the people. Number five, to legitimate conflict as an area of collaborative management. Management must try to change its working and try to establish a win-win situation for both the management and the concerned parties who are going to get affected by the change. Number six, to examine its own leadership style and ways of managing. The top management is a powerful determinant of organizational culture. Therefore, it must always try to remain active and try to opt influential leadership style of managing the people. Number seven, to legitimate and encourage the collaborative management of team, inter-team, and organization cultures. It is a broad intervention goal which largely forms the essence of organizational development. Let's summarize what we have learned in this module. Developing a good working relationship between the client system and the change agent is a good start for the change program. Generally, the organization development program is a slow and gradual program which includes a long period. There is a definite possibility that it may get confronted with the several obstacles in its way, which can be easily resolved if both the parties to contract shows a strong relationship. When we are discussing cordial relationship, there is no such procedure to attain the same, but many identifiable features are there to guide the organizational development practitioners or the client system to work out cordial relationship. The relationship which the change agent or the client shares with each other is not the one which has a specific time period and never happen again, but it has a long way and is basically strengthened by a collaborative, participative effort in diagnosing and implementing the action program. Thank you.